step into the lawless frontier of the Wild West, where legends were born in gunfire and dust. Among the outlaws, none became more feared or more admired than Billy the Kid, the young desperado whose story blurred the line between hero and criminal. His journey through the dusty plains, violent showdowns, and brutal prisons has carved him into one of the greatest legends of the Wild West outlaws and prisons. But was Billy the Kid truly a ruthless killer, or a misunderstood symbol of freedom in a world ruled by lawmen and power? Billy the Kid, born Henry McCarty around 1859, entered the world under circumstances that already place him on the margins of society. His father's identity remains uncertain, and after the death of his mother when he was still a boy, Henry found himself alone in a harsh and unforgiving world. Orphaned in the turbulent years following the Civil War, he grew up in the rough frontier towns of New Mexico and Arizona, lands where survival often depended less on rules and more on grit, quick thinking, and the ability to adapt. Poverty stalked him at every turn, forcing him to rely on odd jobs, street smarts, and sheer determination just to get by. Locals who knew him described him as polite, intelligent, and surprisingly well-mannered for a boy who had little stability. Yet beneath that image of innocence lay the seeds of an outlaw's future. The world of the Wild West was a place of shifting loyalties and constant danger, and without family or guidance, Henry was drawn into the company of gamblers, drifters, and criminals. The young boy who would one day be called Billy the Kid was not born a legend. He was forged by loneliness, loss, and the lawless frontier itself as Henry McCarty grew into his teenage years. The struggles of survival in the Wild West soon pulled him into a darker path. With no stable home, no reliable income, and no one to protect him, he turned to petty theft. Small acts at first, stealing food or clothing just to keep himself alive. But the environment around him was filled with lawless men who thrived on deception, gambling, and violence, and Billy quickly absorbed their ways. His first documented arrest came at the age of 16, when he was caught stealing laundry, a crime that might seem minor by modern standards, but was enough to brand him as a criminal in the eyes of the law. After spending only a short time in custody, he managed to escape, setting a pattern that would follow him for the rest of his life. Soon, his crimes escalated from theft to horse stealing, an offense considered one of the gravest in the frontier world, often punishable by hanging. Each act, though born out of desperation, slowly built his reputation as a dangerous young man with nothing to lose. What began as a survival instinct of an orphan drifted into the path of outlawry, and before long, the name Billy the Kid would become synonymous with defiance against authority. The defining chapter in Billy the Kid's rise from petty thief to legendary outlaw came during the infamous Lincoln County War in New Mexico. At its core, this was not just a feud but a violent struggle for economic control, fueled by greed and corruption. Powerful cattle barons and merchants fought bitterly for dominance over trade and land, and law enforcement often chose sides rather than upholding justice. Billy, still a teenager, found himself swept into the storm when he joined a group known as the Regulators, a faction of hired guns and young men determined to challenge the existing power structure. For Billy, it was not only about money or survival. It became personal after the murder of his friend and employer, John Tunstall, a rancher who had shown him kindness. The killing of Tunstall lit a fire of vengeance in Billy, pushing him to embrace violence as both justice and survival. The Regulators retaliated against their enemies with ambushes, shootouts, and ruthless tactics, and Billy quickly distinguished himself with his fearless nature and uncanny skill with a gun. To his allies, he was brave and loyal. To his enemies, he was a reckless killer. The Lincoln County War transformed him from a wandering youth into a feared outlaw commander, forever tying his name to the blood-soaked conflicts of the Wild West. Billy the Kid's reputation as a gunfighter grew rapidly during and after the Lincoln County War. Unlike many outlaws who relied on bluster and intimidation, Billy was known for his speed, accuracy, and composure under pressure. Witnesses often remarked that he carried himself with an almost playful confidence, smiling even in the middle of deadly encounters. Though small in stature, barely over 5 feet 7 inches and slim in build, he was lightning fast with a revolver, earning a reputation for being able to draw and fire in the blink of an eye. Stories of his gunfights spread quickly across the frontier, some exaggerated by newspapers hungry for sensational tales, others rooted in real bloodshed. It was said that he killed anywhere between 8 and 21 men, though historians debate the true number. What could not be denied, however, was that his name alone struck fear into rivals and lawmen alike. Billy's legend was built on more than violence. It was the aura he carried, a mix of youth, daring, and the sense that he was untouchable. In a world where the fastest gun often ruled, Billy the Kid became the very embodiment of the Wild West's most dangerous and romanticized figure. The young outlaw whose skill at gunfighting made him both admired and hunted. While many saw Billy the Kid as nothing more than a murderer and thief, others viewed him as a symbol of rebellion in a world where justice was often corrupt and controlled by the wealthy. The frontier was dominated by powerful cattle lords, crooked sheriffs, and businessmen who bent the law to protect their own interests. For poor farmers, ranch hands, and drifters, Billy's defiance of authority carried a strange appeal. He wasn't fighting for gold or land. He was resisting a system stacked against the powerless. After the death of John Tunstall, Billy's loyalty to his slain friend turned him into an outlaw with a cause, and this sense of personal honor resonated with many who felt crushed by injustice. Folk stories began to portray him not simply as a criminal, but as a young man standing up against oppression, much like Robin Hood in the old world legends. His charm added to this image. People recalled him as polite, humorous, and quick-witted, very different from the cold-blooded killer painted in newspapers. To those living under the iron grip of the powerful, Billy the Kid represented a spirit of resistance, a reminder that even the most ordinary and disadvantaged could rise up and strike back at authority in the untamed Wild West. Billy the Kid's life quickly became defined by constant flight, a restless existence where every sunrise brought the possibility of capture or death. Moving from dusty towns to lonely ranches, he relied on safe houses, sympathetic locals, and fellow outlaws to keep ahead of the law. He was said to ride hard and fast, covering great distances across the deserts and mountains of New Mexico, often vanishing into rugged terrain where few could follow. His boyish looks, smooth face, small frame, and disarming smile allowed him to blend in more easily than hardened criminals twice his age. Billy had a remarkable ability to escape when cornered, slipping from jails, eluding posses, and outsmarting sheriffs who thought they finally had him trapped. Yet this life on the run was not glamorous. It was a cycle of sleepless nights, shifting loyalties, and the constant burden of betrayal. Every time he sought refuge, he risked being sold out by someone hungry for the reward on his head. Despite these dangers, Billy thrived under the pressure, displaying a daring confidence that seemed to grow with every narrow escape. His ability to keep running, always one step ahead, became as legendary as his skill with a gun, reinforcing his image as the untouchable outlaw of the Wild West. Despite his uncanny ability to evade the law, Billy the Kid was captured multiple times, and each imprisonment tested both his resolve and his ingenuity. His first serious arrest came in the aftermath of the Lincoln County War, when authorities sought to punish those involved in the bloody conflict. Jailed in grim frontier cells, Billy faced harsh conditions, small, dark spaces with minimal food, limited comfort, and a constant threat of violence from guards or rival prisoners. But even in confinement, he refused to be tamed. Stories of his escape spread quickly, highlighting his resourcefulness and fearless determination. In one infamous incident, he managed to slip out of jail by exploiting a moment of distraction, leaving lawmen stunned and humiliated. Each capture and escape added to his growing legend, portraying him as someone who could not be restrained by iron bars or the rules of society. To the frontier communities, he became a symbol of defiance, a young man who refused to let fear or authority dictate his fate. These imprisonments, rather than breaking his spirit, seemed only to strengthen his resolve, sharpening his instincts and solidifying his reputation as a cunning, unstoppable force on the run. The year 1881 became one of the most infamous in Billy the Kid's legend, marked by the daring jailbreak that would cement his reputation as the Wild West's ultimate fugitive. Captured and imprisoned in Lincoln County for murder, Billy faced what seemed like certain execution. The jail, heavily guarded and surrounded by armed deputies, was designed to keep the most dangerous men securely confined. Yet Billy's determination to remain free proved unstoppable. Utilizing both cunning and audacity, he exploited every weakness in the jail's security, observing the routines of guards, identifying overlooked exits, and planning his escape with meticulous care. On the night of the breakout, he overpowered two deputies, seizing their weapons and demonstrating a chilling mix of bravery and calculated violence. The escape stunned the local authorities and shocked the entire territory, spreading news of the audacious act far beyond New Mexico. For the people of the frontier, this jailbreak reinforced the image of Billy the Kid not just as an outlaw, but as a figure of nearly supernatural cunning, someone who could defy the law at every turn, escape impossible odds, and continue roaming the Wild West with an almost untouchable freedom. Billy the Kid's name quickly transcended the dusty streets of New Mexico, becoming synonymous with both fear and fascination across the American frontier. Newspapers at the time, eager to sell sensational stories, played a crucial role in shaping his public image, often exaggerating his exploits, gunfights, and escapes. Some accounts portrayed him as a ruthless killer, a menace to society whose youthful appearance belied the deadly skill he wielded with a revolver. Others, however, painted him as a charming rogue, a clever and daring young man standing up against a corrupt system. Folk tales and dime novels further romanticized his persona, presenting Billy as a symbol of freedom and defiance, an embodiment of the Wild West itself. Portraits and sketches, often idealized, circulated widely, cementing the idea of the boyish outlaw with a mischievous grin and quick draw. This duality of perception, feared by lawmen, admired by locals, and immortalized in popular culture, allowed Billy to occupy a rare place in American legend. His image became more than just the sum of his crimes. It was a living myth, growing larger with every retelling, every capture, and every escape. Billy the Kid's outlaw persona was carefully crafted by circumstance, survival, and the stories that refused to die, making him an enduring icon of rebellion in the Wild West. After Billy the Kid's audacious escapes and high-profile crimes, lawmen across the territory launched relentless efforts to capture him, turning his life into a high-stakes chase that gripped the Wild West. Sheriff Pat Garrett, a determined and experienced lawman, emerged as a central figure in this pursuit, tasked with ending Billy's reign of defiance once and for all. The hunt stretched across vast deserts, rocky canyons, and small frontier towns, with Garrett and his posse tracking Billy's movements through a combination of intelligence, informants, and sheer persistence. Every sighting fueled the growing legend. Reports of Billy outsmarting posses, disappearing into remote terrain, or leaving daring taunts for lawmen amplified both fear and fascination. The pursuit was more than just a manhunt. It became a psychological battle, testing the cunning, endurance, and resilience of both hunter and hunted. Billy's uncanny ability to evade capture, often slipping past multiple armed men or vanishing into rugged landscapes, frustrated authorities and thrilled the public. This relentless chase, chronicled in newspapers and stories that travel far beyond New Mexico, cemented the young outlaw's place in history as a figure whose very existence challenged the limits of law, order, and justice in the untamed frontier. Billy the Kid's life of evasion and defiance reached its dramatic conclusion in what has become one of the most famous showdowns of the Wild West. After months of pursuit, Sheriff Pat Garrett finally cornered him in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, in 1881. Accounts described the tension in the small room where the young outlaw, only 21 years old, faced a lawman who had relentlessly tracked him. The encounter was swift and decisive. Billy, known for his lightning-fast reflexes and daring demeanor, was caught off guard, leaving little chance for escape. In a matter of moments, Garrett's shot ended the life of the boy who had become a living legend, extinguishing the flame of one of the most notorious figures of the American frontier. Yet even in death, Billy's persona refused to fade. Stories of the showdown spread quickly, romanticizing his courage, cunning, and the youthful audacity that had allowed him to defy the law repeatedly. For many, the scene symbolized the harsh reality of the Wild West, a place where law, order, and violence collided, often claiming even the most skilled and daring outlaws in a sudden, final moment that would be remembered for generations. The Wild West was a land of extremes, where justice was as unpredictable as the harsh landscapes that defined it. Lawmen often walked a fine line between order and corruption, and prisons were little more than holding cells where survival depended on toughness, cunning, and sometimes sheer luck. Punishments were brutal and swift, designed to deter crime in territories where formal legal systems were still developing. Hangings were common, and jailbreaks were almost expected, making the concept of justice more a matter of fear than fairness. In this environment, outlaws like Billy the Kid navigated a world where the rules could change overnight and where reputation often carried more weight than law. Courts were frequently biased toward the wealthy or politically connected, leaving the powerless with little recourse. Vigilante justice, lynch mobs, and extrajudicial killings were part of everyday life, and the line between criminal and lawman was often blurred. Billy's repeated escapes and defiance highlighted both the limitations and the harshness of frontier justice, showing that in the Wild West, survival often required bending, evading, or outright breaking the law, while attempting to maintain a sense of personal honor in a world that recognized few rules. Billy the Kid's life and exploits quickly transcended the reality of the frontier, evolving into a legend that would endure long after his death. The combination of his youth, daring escapes, gunfighting skills, and defiance of authority created a narrative too compelling for newspapers, dime novels, and storytellers to ignore. Writers and journalists, hungry for sensational tales, often exaggerated his deeds, portraying him as a near-superhuman figure capable of extraordinary feats of cunning and courage. Each retelling added new layers, blending fact with fiction, until the line between the real Billy and the mythological outlaw became nearly impossible to discern. Folk songs, ballads, and illustrated stories spread across the country, presenting him as a Robin Hood-like figure who defied corrupt authorities and stood up for the powerless. His image became a cultural symbol, representing both the wild, untamed spirit of the American frontier and eternal fascination with outlaws who dare to challenge the law. By turning a young criminal into a larger-than-life character, society not only immortalized his name, but also created a model for countless other outlaw legends that would follow in the American imagination. The story of Billy the Kid and his fellow Wild West outlaws left an indelible mark on American culture, shaping how generations would perceive the frontier and its lawless heroes. Their exploits became the blueprint for countless stories, films, and novels that celebrated rebellion, skill, and survival against impossible odds. Beyond mere entertainment, the legend of these outlaws captured the imagination of people who long for freedom, adventure, and a life unconstrained by authority. Towns and territories still recount tales of their deeds, and historical reenactments, museums, and tours preserve the memory of the frontier's most infamous figures. Billy the Kid, in particular, became a symbol of a youthful, daring spirit of the West, an outlaw whose life, though short, seemed to encapsulate the tension between lawlessness and morality that defined the era. His story influenced the archetype of the American outlaw in popular culture, the clever, charismatic, and often tragic figure who lives on the edge of society, challenging authority while capturing public fascination. Through this legacy, the Wild West Outlaws continue to inspire curiosity, admiration, and debate, reminding modern audiences that the myths of the past often hold a mirror to the values, struggles, and dreams of the people who live them. The legend of Billy the Kid is inseparable from the blurred line between history and myth, making it difficult to separate the man from the stories that followed him. While court records, newspaper articles, and eyewitness accounts provide glimpses into his real-life exploits, countless tales have been embellished, romanticized, or outright fabricated over the decades. Some claim he killed dozens of men, while others insist the true number was far lower. Some describe him as a cold-blooded murderer, others as a misunderstood youth driven by circumstance. This duality creates a complex portrait of a boy who became a symbol of rebellion and defiance, a figure who could be both feared and admired. Popular culture, through novels, films, song, and television, has continually reshaped his image, emphasizing heroism, tragedy, or sheer audacity, depending on the storyteller's aim. Historians still debate the truth behind many events, from his escapes to his final confrontation with Sheriff Pat Garrett, highlighting how memory and myth can intertwine. Yet it is precisely this mixture of fact and fiction that ensures Billy the Kid remains immortal, a legend of the Wild West whose story continues to captivate, inspire, and challenge our understanding of justice, morality, and the untamed frontier. Billy the Kid's story may have ended at the age of 21, but his legend has lived on for over a century, capturing the imagination of historians, writers, and adventurers alike. He embodies the untamed spirit of the Wild West, a time when survival, skill, and daring define one's place in the world. Through his escapes, battles, and defiance of authority, Billy became more than a boy with a gun. He became a symbol of rebellion, resilience, and the thin line between law and chaos. Whether seen as a ruthless outlaw or a misunderstood hero, his life reminds us of the harsh realities of frontier justice and the enduring fascination with those who dare to live on the edge. In the end, Billy the Kid is not just a chapter in history. He is an eternal legend, echoing to the canyons, deserts, and stories of the Wild West, forever immortal in the American imagination.